Mr. President.
The Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today marks 1 month since the illegal and unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine began. Since that time, Ukrainian President Zelensky has proved himself a courageous and inspiring leader. The Ukrainian military has performed heroically in the face of overwhelming violence, and the Ukrainian people have shown the world what true courage looks like. There is one person who is responsible for so much suffering and catastrophe: Vladimir Putin. Faced with this senseless attack, Ukraine and the international community have rallied together to stand up to Putin with a unified front. It is stunning, therefore, that many of my Republican colleagues now seem intent upon suggesting that Russia invaded Ukraine because of something the Biden administration did or failed to do. There's no polite way to put this. This attempt to score political points by blaming the Biden administration for Putin's invasion is unacceptable and inappropriate. I think it is important to remind my colleagues of some important facts they are ignoring. To be clear, the Biden administration has done more than any previous administration when it comes to support for Ukraine. In the roughly 14 months since taking office, the administration has provided more than $2 billion in security assistance for Ukraine, including weapons like Stingers and Javelins that are proving so effective today. This is far more than any previous administration, and I applaud those 17 Republican senators who voted for this military and humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Further, since last fall, the Biden administration has worked tirelessly to build a coalition of nations committed to supporting Ukraine. So when the time came to stand up to Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, the United States stood with more than 30 countries from across the globe to condemn this violence, to execute the largest sanctions and export controls in history, and to support the Ukrainian people by surging humanitarian and security aid into the country. This overwhelming international response would not have happened without President Biden's leadership. We also should not forget a major reason Vladimir Putin felt so emboldened to invade Ukraine and challenge NATO. For 4 years, President Trump treated our allies like adversaries and pandered to dictators and despots, especially Putin. Mr. Trump's animosity towards NATO created lingering doubt about the United States' reliability and the cohesion of the alliance, jeopardizing our greatest advantage against Russia. The Trump administration's failure to hold Russia accountable for numerous violations of international norms served only to embolden Putin in challenging U.S. leadership and the rules-based international order. Most disturbing, of course, was the offense that led to Mr. Trump's first impeachment: his efforts to extort Ukraine's security for political favors at home. That an American president would abuse his office to pressure a foreign government to interfere in our democracy as part of a re-election bid remains deeply troubling. Mr. Trump's actions damaged NATO, weakened Ukraine, and ceded political leverage to Putin. Now the Ukrainian people are paying the price. Fortunately, at this critical time, the United States and our allies are no longer hamstrung by Mr. Trump's erratic leadership, a fact Vladimir Putin must understand very well at this moment. If Putin thought his actions over the past month would drive a wedge between NATO members and within the international community, he has found himself badly mistaken. Led by President Biden, the international community has united in a way not seen in generations, and Russia is already straining under the immense cost we have levied against it and the courageous actions of the Ukrainian people. With that in mind, I'd like to take a few moments to correct the record on a few debates about our ongoing support for Ukraine. First, on the issue of arms transfers, The United States has led the international effort to identify capabilities the Ukrainian military can put to immediate use. And I think we have to emphasize immediate use. Transferring equipment that cannot be used effectively because of the combat conditions in the area or because the need to train or refit the equipment is not going to give the Ukrainian forces immediate assistance, and that's the kind of assistance they need. In fact, over the past few months, the State Department has worked with incredible speed to facilitate the transfer of U.S. origin equipment from partner nations to Ukraine. However, all of these transfers, whether it be former Soviet-era air defense systems or former Soviet aircraft, occur on a bilateral basis. And ultimately, it is a decision for each partner nation to make within their own internal channels. And with regard to a no-fly zone, the United States has enjoyed the superiority for the past 20 years of conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan, so it is perhaps understandable that some of my colleagues think such endeavors are easily achieved and without risk. However, establishing and enforcing a no-fly zone against a near-peer competitor like Russia is far more complex. To do so would almost certainly drag the United States and the entire NATO alliance into direct armed conflict with Russia. It would also put the women and men tasked with flying such missions at great risk. President Biden has rightly said that the U.S. will not seek direct conflict with Russia, and establishing a no-fly zone would almost certainly defy that aim. So to my colleagues, both on this side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle, enough with trying to blame the Biden administration at every step in this conflict. This crisis demands unity and strength, and I call upon my colleagues, particularly my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, to join me in condemning the one person who bears responsibility for the horrific violence against the people of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin. Mr. President, I yield the floor.